Mardi Gras is an extension of humanity or people's attempts to make sense of the inexplicable. Mardi Gras is a festival that has evolved over the course of hundreds of years, and it is a time that our ancient forebears who wandered in the wilderness were combining some festivals that were pagan in nature and interpreting them in a more Christian context. So like the reading said, many of our other traditions like Christmas and Easter have adopted and adapted and inherited symbols that were common around them. And they take them, they borrow them, and they then create further kinds of symbolic representations to help them make meaning of life, to help them understand the comings and goings of life, the good, the bad, the evil, the joy, and all of those kinds of things, and to give them an approach to life that will give them the context to survive and to thrive and to be as whole as they can possibly be. So here we are hearing a story in the Gospel of Mark that is generally heard on what's called Transfiguration Sunday. And Transfiguration Sunday is another attempt by the writer of the Gospel of Mark to help us understand and make sense of sometimes what we consider the inexplicable. Very carefully clearly what happens is Peter, James, and John have been called by Jesus, and they're going to go away to find some space and time to be quiet together and meditate and to recharge the batteries perhaps. And they climb to the top of a mountain, and as they do so, Jesus is transfigured, and the imagery is white, glowing nature of Christ, and they have images of Moses and Elijah, and they're hallucinating and seeing something that is profound and powerful that changes them. And they don't initially say, okay, let's celebrate this. And they don't initially say, this is something that was misunderstood by me. Now I understand. Basically what they said is, gotta hang on to this. Gotta hang on to this. So they said, let's make a tent. Let's create something that can keep this experience for us so that we can experience it more often. They want to claim that which is not claimable. And over the course of my career, I've really struggled with coming up with kind of new ways of thinking about this transfiguration message. And as I was thinking about it this week, two things happened that really helped me. And the first was Thursday. Did anybody see the takeoff of the SpaceX rocket? Who did? Not many of you, so that means I need to explain a little bit about it. Elon Musk owns a company called SpaceX. It's a private company, and his dream is to take people to Mars. And he launched, and his group launched, the most powerful rocket ever launched by humankind. It was staggering. Not just that, the booster rockets thing came off, and historically what happens is the booster rockets fall off into the ocean and are never seen again. These booster rockets flew back to Earth and landed precisely, at least two of the three of them flew back to Earth precisely where they were supposed to. And then the rocket took off, and what emerged, I mean, here's a marketing wizard, what emerged from this rocket booster was a Tesla car flying in space with a dummy behind the wheel with a thing at the screen that said, "Don't panic" on it. And it is going to fly into the heavens for thousands of years. Just awesome. And in the midst of watching that, I was, flitting about and came across a discovery. Just the name's just gone out of my head, but it was discovered last year. It's a small sun with 7 planets around it, 3 of which are habitable. That is, they consider them in a range where liquid water could probably exist, and by extension, obviously, the possibility of life. 40 million light years from Earth. Virtually around the corner. 40 million light years. And I went, how far is that? So, good old Google. 40 million light years is if you traveled at 15 miles per second, speed of light, to go 1 light year would take you 12,700 years. To go from here to our next neighbor within these habitable planets would take you half 500,000 years. Longer than humanity has existed on Earth. Longer than recorded history. It is awe-inspiring. How do I begin to wrap my head around understanding that and the implications of that? It was a transfiguring moment. It's a transfiguring moment. The awesome nature of God our Creator that gives us the capacity to live on this wee small planet, in this wee small universe, or wee small solar system. God is awesome. And as I'm thinking about this, the other thing that happened over the last number of months for me is I went into a box and pulled out all these 8mm videotapes that were collecting dust I haven't looked at in decades. It was basically the history of my family. 20 hours of the history of my family that I had transposed onto hard drives over the course of a number of weeks. So I thought I'd sit down a few weeks back and look at these. And these were going to be gifts for my children at Christmas time. And I sat down and I began to watch them. And like that moment of thinking about that planet, all those light years away, the same experience of watching the birth of my children, them coming home at 1 week of age, of watching them learning to walk, of watching them get into trouble, of, the awesome nature of the relationship, the feeling I have for myself, between myself and my family and my children, is awesome. It is inexplicable. I do not have the capacity to articulate what that feeling is. Frankly, God doesn't care. God does not care if I have the capacity to articulate that experience and the feeling I have for my children and my relationship with them, the love that is given and received. God doesn't care if I can understand or explain the awesome nature of this created universe. All God cares about is that I am part of this created order, and that I give thanks to God for the gift of this life that I live. And you know what? I cannot put it in a tent. I cannot contain it. I cannot say, I want this to happen to me again, because it's not up to me. It is up to God and my faithfulness that God will be there in the midst of this life I live. And as the disciples, as they stood on the mountaintop, and Moses and Elijah disappeared, and the arraignment of Jesus disappeared and subsided, and then Jesus brought them back down, both literally and symbolically, to earth. They were changed people. They lived anew. And that is what our life in Christ is about. Is a faithful devotion and understanding that we are not alone, and that we are given the honor and the privilege to live a life as children of God in large ways, extent of this universe, in the smallest ways, in terms of the relationships of the people that we encounter and love every day. So on this Mardi Gras, we are here to celebrate and give thanks for this festival, and to joyfully celebrate the gift of each other, the gift of this times as we begin to prepare ourselves to walk through the journey of Lent, reflecting on those moments in time that we share with God in Christ. Thanks be to God. Amen.